今天这个社区平台，第一个演讲的主题是 Open Social Overview， 演讲者是 Chris Schalk 和沈翔博士。Chris Schalk，一贯热衷于推广 Google 的平台和相关 API 的开发。他现在致力于建设一个国际化的 Open Social 开发社区。他与日本和印度的 Open Social 开发社区合作，做了很多有建设性的工作。Chris 同时还支持建立了 Google 的用户技术小组，该小组现在有几个分部和几百个成员。在加入 Google 以前 ，Chris 在 Oracle 公司的 Java 工具开发组任首席项目经理一职。Chris 还是 Java Server Faces 的 Complete Reference 一书的合作者。沈翔博士是 Google 开发者支持部门的技术主管，2008年加入 Google， 他在德克萨斯大学取得博士学位。在加入 Google 之前，沈翔博士先后工作于雅虎、以贝、Ariba、WebEx。下面有请演讲者给大家做报告。
好，谢谢，我叫沈翔啊，我们今天来这里很高兴，这个 Chris 在这里。
谢谢。早上好，I forgot 在这里，我很高兴来北京。谢谢。
你们听得出来，这个 Chris 学语言的本事很行的，他可以讲这个西班牙文，英文当然是会讲的。这个现在还在学中文，那个来这里第一次要学中文，他第一句话要学的是不要。为什么说不要呢？因为他有些这个吃的东西什么这个。能这个有腿有可以跑的那种怪的东西，他不敢吃的。所以去中国餐馆吃东西的时候呢，他看了这些东西，他一定要学会讲，说不要。
Thank you. So I'll switch to English now. And anyway, thank you. 谢谢. We'll be talking about Open Social. So Sean Chen is here. He works with me in Google in California, and we'll be providing an overview on Open Social. So I'm going to do some translation so that I can. Yeah, okay.
我们这个讲完了以后呢，最后有那么几个小礼品。这个得了个小礼品的这个条件是什么呢？就是听完以后，有提问的人，提的问题最好的人，这个可以拿到奖品。所以大家注意听完以后赶紧提问。
So in general, Open Social is about making the web even more social. So it provides a set of technologies that allow you to interact with other people in a much more efficient manner. And the technology is essentially based on open standards.
对，所以先讲一下这个 Open Social。Open Social 呢，中文没有翻译的。那个 Open 的意思呢，就是公开的意思 ；Social 呢是这个社交化的意思。当然，Social 呢也可以理解成是这个找男女朋友的意思。所以我一看今天男士比较多，所以我们今天在这里不做social，今天是讲这个 open social。
So the details on Open Social is, first of all, there are a family of APIs that are based on standards, so JavaScript, REST, OAuth for security, and essentially those technologies are made available via open source, and there's also a reference implementation of the technology, also known as Shindig. So we'll be talking about Shindig as well in the presentation. And so all of those put together are built by not just Google, but a community of developers who are working with Google in multiple companies, so partners working with Google to make Open Social successful.
也是大部分的这个代码呢，都是所谓开源的代码，所以很多在网上你都可以下载下来，然后当场就可以用，你可以改啊，可以自己用在你的自己的这些应用里，都是开源的代码。
So who uses Open Social? A number of very large social networking sites around the world already. High5, MySpace, MySpace China, for example, Orkut, iGoogle, and there's a very long list of people who are using Open Social today. Now, the people who consume these applications that are hosted in these networks are the application users, the web users, so they're to be able to consume the applications. And then, of course, there's a very large population of application developers who are building the applications. So all in all, it's a very large group of people who are building open social applications.
我假定这个房间里这个大部分人都是开发者，所以是这个 应用开发者这一类。
Feel free if you want to keep it short. So what are some of the advantages of Open Social? Well, it has a lot of features, and since it's open source, you can use the software for free. So you can build applications, you don't have to purchase any software. And this has resulted in a very large pool of application developers all around the world who are now building open social applications. And this, in turn, has allowed over 275 million users across the world now who are now making use of rich and interesting web or open social applications across the world.
所以这个社交网啊，这是得到很多好处的最大的这个第一个。然后开发人呢，主要你们的好处是什么？你写出一个应用程序出来，一下就有很多客户马上就可以用，上网了2亿7000万进去，将来可以达到5亿人。所以你写了一个应用程序，送出去以后，在不同的网站到处都可以用。当然，这个用户自己就可以有很多新的功能可以去用。然后我们下面会讲到其他有些什么功能。
So here's an example, or essentially a visual display of a lot of the different containers. And by containers, we mean these are social network sites that are now either completely live with open social applications or are in the process of building up their open social technology so they can soon host open social applications in a number of different manners. So for example, we have Hi-Fi, Orchid, who are more traditional social networks, but we have other business-related companies such as Oracle and LinkedIn who are approaching it from a more of a business angle.
我想问一下，这里有多少人用MySpace 巨流的？举手，有多少人用？好像不是很流行的。还有校内有多少人用？校内更流行一些。所以我要假定校内找女朋友最好找的地方。
So let's explain what was it like to build applications before Open Social? So first of all, if you wanted to create an application for a social networking site, well, in the first place, a lot of sites didn't even offer a way to even do this. It was entirely the responsibility of the networking site. But once the application platform started to become available, what was happening was that there became too many different ways to provide social applications. So as you can see in this picture, there's a developer and he wants to write his open social, or he wants to write a social application, but there's too many different platforms to choose from. So this is what it was like before Open Social.
很多人会有同感吧，在这写了一个程序，然后再写给另外一个地方写很多次很麻烦。
So now with Open Social, the developer is much happier and he can focus on a core common set of standard things to work with building open social applications, and then he can write it once and then deploy everywhere.
一次就写成功，然后就可以到处用。
So now, as you can see, he's happy and he's able to write his social application based on a core set of standards now that will run on multiple different environments. So it will run with Orchid or Hi-Fi or MySpace China or any other social networking sites around the world that adopt the standard.
我听人家讲好酷是小女孩讲的话，所以现在 Chris 学会了。
So Sean, why don't you describe a little bit of using the social networks, and feel free to elaborate with them if you'd like.
这张图上呢是一个典型的社交网页。你看这个地方这个人头像，大概也许你们有些人会认出来是开复理财，是Google 在中国的总裁。所以我一看见他呢，当然我就想开复他有些什么样的朋友，我要跟他交上朋友。然后他最近在网上做些什么事情？就这几个问题，就是3类，一个是他的信息，一个他的朋友有些什么，还有他最近做了些什么事情，这我挺有兴趣的。然后有了 Open Social 以后有些什么好处呢？我看见开复的在网上，然后我现在跟他交成朋友了，我就希望让用Open Social 的应用程序呢，给他送个礼物去。比如这里呢，我可以选择熊猫的这种礼物，也可以选择其他的我看。圣诞老人啊这些，什么天使啊所以可以选一个熊猫的礼物。
So if I understand correctly, based on my vast amount of knowledge of the Chinese language, I understand that you want to give hugs to a certain person named Kai Fu who you
绝对是的，没错，我要给开复一个拥抱。
Yeah, I'm joking about my massive amount of Chinese.
所以我刚才选了一个这个熊猫的给他的，然后现在呢就是选我的朋友里面，所以我这里选开复一个，这样我给他一个这个拥抱以后呢，希望年终他奖金可以赶紧给我提上来。
Thank you. So, Sean just described in Chinese essentially the user process by which you can interact with various social applications. Now let's talk about how to actually develop these types of applications.
现在是我们讲怎么去开发这种产品，开发这种应用。
So as you can see, and I mentioned before, they're based on standards. So you can use HTML, JavaScript, LAMP, which is an acronym for Linux, Apache, and MySQL and PHP. But it doesn't really matter. You can use any number of these different technologies, as well as Windows. You can also integrate your applications into third-party cloud services. So, for example, App Engine could be a nice example of a cloud service, or Amazon, or any other types. So, in general, building applications is a standards-based approach, but you can tie into any number of languages. Secondly, the OpenSocial API itself has built into it, a set of viral features. And these features allow you to easily share your application to other users within the social network.
所以他刚才讲的这是社交网的一大特点，就是说你在那个网上做了一个事情，然后你能够通过一些渠道让你朋友可以看见。这个我们后面会讲到一些具体的例子。所以关键的就是利用这些传播性的这个特点，能够让你的这个应用程序尽快的让更多的用户来用。
And then the nice thing also now is that once you learn the social APIs, you can then utilize a number of what are called sandboxes. So these are developer sandboxes for development environments by which you can build and test and debug your applications on a number of these different open social platforms. So for example, MySpace China has its development sandbox or development platform. Likewise, Orchid and High5 and so forth.
所以这开发人的这个 sandbox 在中国有好几个地方已经有了。这个剧我最近还看见有一个他们有个竞赛的，所以如果你要是有兴趣的话，可以赶紧去开个账户，然后就可以开始开发了。
Okay, so let's drill down, focus a little bit more on the actual API. The OpenSocial is essentially in two areas. There's the OpenSocial JavaScript APIs, and then there's the RESTful APIs, or RESTful set of services. And they each have their own aspects of how you can interact with OpenSocial data. So for example, with the JavaScript APIs, you can utilize JavaScript and then have that work within an iframe or within your browser window, and it would display data, and then you can interact via a typical web page. The second area is RESTful services. This is a new aspect of OpenSocial, and this allows you to interact entirely independent of JavaScript. So you can interact with an OpenSocial server and request social data, such as people or activities and so forth. And this can be done from a server-to-server aspect. So you could be writing, say, Java or some type of server-side code that makes a request to an OpenSocial server to fetch, say, a set of friends or something like that, and the data can then be retrieved back to your server.
所以这两部分这个 API， 第一部分是 JavaScript， 第二部分所谓叫 RESTful。JavaScript 这边相对比较容易，刚才这个在 Keynote demo 里面你们看见了，基本上就是现成的，你可以看得见的，这个代码都可以看见，你 copy 过来 ，cut 下来以后，然后填进去、切进去，马上就可以转了，所以很容易的。
So now let's look into the JavaScript APIs. So if you're going to work with the JavaScript APIs, you have three core areas. And these are broken down in people and friends. So for example, if you want to access your social network of friends programmatically, you can use this section of the API. Likewise, activities is another portion of the API that allows you to see what your friends are doing or share what you are doing. And this is known as posting an activity. And the third part is the persistent portion of the API. And in this sense, it allows you to save data on the server. So this is a nice, convenient way that you can save some temporary data. And not only can you save it for yourself, but you can share it with your friends.
所以我举几个例子给您，比如说刚才我们看那个开复的信息， 所以一上来我要看他是男的还是女的，然后这个他的名字什么，他有哪些朋友，这个我很有兴趣。所以你可以就是用 JavaScript 写程序，然后直接把它调出来。然后这个活动流这部分呢，我想看的就是开发最近在做些什么事情，在 TI 网上也好，在其他网上也好，他最近做了些什么事情，他是不是给朋友送了礼啊什么？然后这个持久化数据这部分呢，比如说我给开户送了个礼，然后我希望把这个存下，年终的时候我可以提出来，然后再问他，你看我给你送了礼，现在应该有发奖金了。
So let's take a look at some of the code. So in this case, this is some JavaScript code that allows you to fetch both the viewer, which is the person viewing the web page, as well as who is this viewer's friends. So all of my friends if I'm viewing this web page. And it works in an asynchronous fashion, meaning like you create a request, and you send the request to a server, it's an open social server, and then you create a callback function, which is then invoked once the response comes back. So it's an asynchronous, typically AJAX programming mode.
所以你们看见这个很容易的，这个一共才几行字啊，5行6行字，因为它很多现成的都已经做好了。这个像这个比如说 request 这个 object 已经给你现成做好，你只要去实现一个，然后去靠它这个去取一下，抽取一下，然后这部分这个 onload friends 是抽取回来的数据，你怎么处理？是在这个页面上显出来，你怎么去显示它？所以它下面会讲到。
One thing I was wondering is like we can also ask the audience if they like the translations or if they want to continue on the.
所以我们现在这么讲，这个形式你们喜欢吗？可以吗？速度正好。
Okay.
He can speak，他能够讲得更快点。他还可以讲西班牙文，你们想听？
Okay. So now here's the callback function that allows you, once the data comes back, you can then display it onto your page. And this is just an example of basic dynamic HTML programming where we take a JavaScript response object from the open social server and then display it using typical HTML dynamically.
就这个回调函数，这个退回来这个数据你取出来，然后下面这部分很容易了，在这个 HTML 上怎么给它显示出来？这个你取回来朋友是什么？然后把它所以比如说我说这是开户的朋友，然后把这个朋友全列出来就行，很简单。Yes, I'm ready. 我是非常想做开户的这个朋友。他问我为什么老是提到开户的名字。
As a popular word. So anyway, so now let's take a look at posting an activity. This is something, a bit of information that you want to share with your friends. And so in this case, the API is pretty straightforward. You want to create an activity, and you can send some text. You can specify the priority, and then also you can specify a callback if you want to. But that's essentially it. It's up to the social networking site to then publish or allow users to view the activity data. So for example, I'll show you in a second on Orchid, which is a social networking site popular in India and Brazil and somewhat in the United States. They show activities as what are called updates.
这个是这个发表活动流的这个函数，这个 Chris 马上他用那个一个叫 Orchid 的这个社交网站去马上给你们显示这个活动流怎么做。
So and then lastly, here's a bit of example code on how you can use the persistence portion of the JavaScript API. So in this case, I'm creating some, just as an example, some random numbers, and I'm going to utilize the JavaScript API to store these random numbers, and I'll apply like a key, so it's like a hash map, so I can then persist it onto the server. And then, of course, I can have a callback function as well that will then be invoked once the data has been successfully stored on the server.
这就是我刚才比如举例子讲的，我要把那个送开户那个礼物的数据存下来，在这个例子里面呢，就是存了一个这个随机数据而已。
And then, likewise, if I want to fetch the persistent data, I can go through and then just use the same keys that I stored the data on, and then pull out the data and then display it.
所以这个函数是把它那个存进去的数据呢再调回来。
And in this case, I have a function here that's I'm going to use to actually display the data. But I won't show it to you because it's the same type of thing where you just use dynamic HTML to display the results. Okay, so let's take a look at how everything that I've showed you, I'm going to show you using Orchid now. Okay?
那下面就是做一个这个演示，实况演示。
So this is a sandbox development environment that I'm going to switch over to. So that's the slightly younger version of.
这是 Chris 年轻的时候长相。
Like a few years ago. Yeah.
他不显得那么老吧？
So the first thing in order to build an open social application is you're going to build essentially an XML file that contains JavaScript and HTML, right? So in this case, I can go to, and you would typically publish this on the web somewhere. So I happen to have some example gadgets here. So I have list friends. So it's a very basic social application that I can look at the source. And as you can see, I'm doing the same bit of data that I showed you in the example, and then here I'm just fetching my list of friends and then displaying it in the page. So that's just an XML file with some JavaScript inside of it. But so what do I do to publish this to a sandbox environment? Well, I can take the URL and then move over into my sandbox environment and then add the application. And when I click Add the application, it'll then go ahead and process it and says, go ahead and list friends example. I'm going to add this to my environment. And then once it's loaded into the environment, I can see these are my friends within this particular website. And so pretty straightforward, actually. Okay.
记住有没有提问啊？最后提问有奖。 等会儿最后提。
What's that? Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Okay. So now that was a very simple example of how you can build your open social application. You can host it on an external website, and then you can consume it in a developer environment. Oh, I should probably show you actually before going too far. So the other aspect of a developer sandbox is that you can also list like a number of different examples. So in this case, I have some simple examples where, in this case, I want to post an activity. So hello, Beijing.
所以他在演示怎么去显示一下他的做的事情和活动流这部分。
And this example, I loaded it before, but it was from. Oops, I'll show it to you right here. This activities example here. It's the same thing, except for I have code here that posts an activity. And now when I go back to my website, so now I've loaded it, I'm going to go ahead and post it. And it's sent the request back to the server. And then, as I mentioned before, Orchid handles activities as updates. So if I look under updates, and in this case I can say my updates, I can see that I have hello Beijing. Right there. So this is just a way of transferring that data back to the server.
这就是我们先前讲的那个社交应用程序所谓的这种像病毒性的传播这个特性。所以你做了一件事情，然后这里的这个活动流的这个信息呢，就在同一个圈子里，他们就看见了以后呢，他就会过来，是这个人做了这个事情，他的这个应用程序的名字叫 Activities 了，他就一 click 就可以，他也可以去装，这样子传播起来特别快，就是为什么你一个出去以后可以1、2个星期，好几10万人去开始用起来。
Okay. So now let's talk about the actual architecture that makes this possible. Orchid, as well as High5 and some of the others that I mentioned, use a technology known as Shindig. Shindig is an open source reference implementation of OpenSocial. You can use Shindig if you want, or you can write your own server that follows the specification. Now, as you can see in this diagram here, Shindig itself is primarily two components. It's a gadget server. So if you're familiar with iGoogle Gadgets, it's essentially the same engine, but it's inside of OpenSocial, or it's inside of Shindig and made available as open source software. And likewise, there's the other element, which is the OpenSocial data server. So this is a portion of Shindig that allows you to interact with the social aspects of your network. So you can see your friends, you can post activities and so forth. So that's essentially that part of the component.
对，我们前一半刚才讲的就是怎么开发这个应用程序。那现在呢，我们就变了一下，就是讲了后台怎么做。所以如果你有你自己的网页，或者你有大的网页，然后你想后台去实现这个把这应用程序给显示在这部分，那个社交应用程序呢，是我们先前讲的。那这部分这个Shindig这部分呢，是马上我们下面讲你后台去怎么实现的。然后 Google 已经有很多这个现成的这个Shindig 的这个代码，你可以在你上面装起来，大概20分钟你就可以装起来，装起来马上就可以做这种应用程序的显示的事情。
So why would you want to use Shindig? Well, it's open source. It's got a very large and strong open source development community. It's got good quality code, so you can use it today. For example, Orchid High Five, they're already in production using OpenSocial. It's up to date with the current specification of OpenSocial, and it's also language neutral. And this is a very important point about OpenSocial. Today, you can use OpenSocial or Shindig with Java environment or PHP. The Shindig community is looking for contributors to also help and get involved and also provide different languages as well. So we have a commitment to being able to have multiple languages on Shindig, but for today it's Java and PHP.
这里列出来的好处很多了，最主要的好处，马上我们下一讲会讲的，大概就是会演示的，15分钟你就可以装起来，很快很容易。
So let's go ahead and take a look at how you would get started with Apache Shindig. So first of all, this is the website that you would go to download Shindig and understand how to get involved in the open source development process for Shindig.
这里就是下载软件的地方，那个 Apache 软件的地方。
So here's the website. It's currently known as Incubator Project. So it's a new baby project within the Apache Software Foundation. So I'm sure you've probably heard of Apache Software. So here, if you want to understand how to get the code and build it, you can follow these instructions here and be able to check out the code from the Subversion repository and then get it running locally on your own server or on your own machine and be able to customize or just understand how the code works. Likewise, once you become familiar with the code, you can also follow the instructions on how you can create patches or create extensions to Shindig. And then you can submit this to the community for Shindig. And then if everyone votes on it and they like it, that can be essentially added as an official part of Shindig as well. So if you have like C++ or another language that you want to create for Shindig, you're more than welcome to use this process to contribute. And I'm going to finish off and do some more slides. So the other thing is that if you want to if you have questions, you can subscribe to the Shindig-dev email list. And there's also an issue tracker. So you can look up the current issues that people are finding with Shindig and just get involved that way. Okay. So let's examine the other portion of the APIs with OpenSocial. And this is something that is made possible via also Shindig as well. And it's a fairly new area. And so this allows you, as I mentioned before, to interact with a server entirely independent of JavaScript. So you can have just a server issuing a basic HTTP GET request to extract data. So feel free to jump in.
我有个问题就是，在这里写 JavaScript 的人多少？能举个手吗？用 PHP 的啦。OK， 所以用 PHP，你想用那个 PHP 直接取数据的话呢，你就用这个 REST 这部分。如果你是 JavaScript 呢，就用前面我们刚才讲的 JavaScript 的那个 API。
You would also ask how many people are building server-side Java applications as well. I don't know what the number might be, but
对，还有多少人用这个服务器端的这种 Java 来写程序的？能举个手吗？
Yeah. So in that sense, it's very easy to make a REST request and extract the same social data, but then you could utilize it in JSPs or Java server faces or whatever. It doesn't matter. Okay. So here's the new component that also has just recently been added to Shindig. It's a REST server, and in this sense, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to run in a gadget or anything. You can decide how you integrate the data. So finally, with Shindig, as I mentioned before, a number of different social networking sites are being very successful. Sean, do you want to describe a little bit of the success that High Five is having with Shindig?
对，这个 High Five 是美国一个挺成功的一个这个社交网站，这个最大的像这个具有啊 MySpace 啊，还有那个 Facebook 呀 ，High Five 大概现在是第3。它呢，这个一个月的流量大概有多少？一个月有每天有10个亿的这个点击量。它呢用Shindig呢，现在有40台Shindig server，服务器，用的这个效果挺好的。他们当然改了一些，但是基本上就是说可以证明这个Shindig虽然是这个开源开发出来的，但是这个在这个完全是这个运行这个当中用的是相当成功了，所以是完全可以用的。
Yeah, exactly. So, Sean, you also contribute some of these slides here with regards to some of the key things about the success of open social sandboxes. Do you want to go ahead and describe some of the exact numbers that are coming in now?
对，所以这个 Open Social 去年呢，大概是10月份开始出来的，但是正式这个推出的时候呢，是大概今年3月份，所以3月份到现在大概正好是88天这种范围。这今年08年不是开奥运会嘛？所以88天下来，现在数据结果怎么样了？这个最主要的3个容器呢是这个具有High Five 和 Orchid， 这3个主要上网了。下面还有几个现在正在 Sandbox 里面。88天下来呢，这个相当成功。那个整个这个3家这个社交网呢，大概有2亿7千多万的这个可以达到的用户，所以就是说在座的是这个开发者的人啊，你今天写一个程序到这3家上去用的话呢，这个你能达到就是2700多万的用户可能达到的。这2亿7千多万的这个可能用的这个用户里面呢，3个月不到的时间已经有8800万，就说去装了这个某种应用程序了，所以这个传播的相当快，就是我们刚才讲到的这种像病毒性传播的这种特点，导致它能够传播的这么快。然后现在总共呢有大概2400多个应用程序，那个具有是最多，大概有1400多个，那个 High Five 呢大概有700-800个左右。然后还有呢，第3步就是这个开发者总共现在大概有2万，也许3万人现在，所以我们希望呢，在中国的这个开发者呢，能够赶紧加入这个，因为我是听讲这个。印度有很多开发程序的人，印度的这个开发程序人现在都已经想打入中国市场，他们已经准备去开发一些应用程序搬到中国来用。所以中国的这个，我希望在座的各位呢，赶紧这个加油，能够赶紧在印度人来之前，赶紧开始做起来。
Exactly. Couldn't put it better myself. And then, of course, the other aspect is we have additional sandboxes in the development environment that are coming up now. And this is actually some very new data. So, for example, in addition to those ones that are currently live, we have some very good relationships that have been created with a number of these new partners. And there's also some new Chinese open social partners that have now committed to supporting open social.
往前看的话呢，这个未来也很明朗，这个很明亮，这个已经有这个大的头了，巨头了，像雅虎啊、AOL 啊，他们都是这个上好几亿的人，所以他们已经这个公开支持这个 Open Social 了。但是呢，他们的Sandbox 还没出来。如果他们一旦加入以后呢，大概总体的这个用户人员呢是大概有5个亿多。然后我们现在最近这个正在跟这个中国很多家也在一起谈的。这个我想大家刚才我已经问过了，这个校内这个刚刚加入，比如说还有51挺大一家，天际这个中国的这个职业这个社交网，还有一起好像比较新的是吧？海内这几家现在都大概有8家左右，也许已经10家了，所以这是最新加入这个 Open Social 这个平台上的。
So anyway, we're now getting to the part where we can take some questions, and if you want to describe I think we have some of those stuffed animals in the back as well. But shall we open it up for questions, and we'll be able to. Sean is very busy with something. What's up? You guys obviously have something very important to talk about. Okay.
所以现在呢，再给大家介绍一位，这是Dan Peterson，是我们这个 Open Social 的这个产品主管，他有最新的这个更新的消息来跟大家共享一下。
Yeah, go for it, go for it.
Dan 的这个很忙，从这个芒特约刚飞过来，这几天都没睡好觉，所以，但是他讲的东西是最新消息现在。
Hey everybody, I just want to, I don't know if it's still on?
Yeah.
Hey everybody, I just want to take a few minutes to underscore how really excited we are about the progress we've seen so far in the US. These are all of the sites that have already launched to users or to developers thus far. As Sean had mentioned, we're reaching hundreds of millions of users, and I'm getting feedback. That said, we've also seen very strong momentum with some Chinese social networks, as Jason will show here. We're very excited to welcome all of them to the open social community, and all of you as well to the open social community. With Wu Yao and Xiaonei especially, we're very excited to have more potential reach here in China for these applications and better engage with users on the web. That said, all of you now are joining a very healthy community of other sites from around the world, including some notable ones such as LinkedIn, Yahoo, AOL. So again, we're very excited to have this growing community. With that, I think we can just do Q&A.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan. Do you want to give a little recap? Yeah.
所以大家刚才讲了这个，最新加入的这几家，是我们这个 Open Social 这个中国为主的，然后我们就希望让这个更多人能够加入这个行当，这个 Open Social 下面这个前景无量，所以希望大家一起加入。所以我们下面问问题了，这位先生有个问题。
喂，想问一下一个关于那个 JavaScript， 如果我开发一个 widget， 然后放进去的话，我有没有能力说把他们就是说social network 一些站的信息带到传到我的站里，因为我要建一个比较有意思的东西，我必须要知道一些信息处理。
对，所以
支持。
对，刚才问题呢是the question is that 我先讲中文。问题是先用 JavaScript 写了以后，取出来的这个社交数据，它的问题是能不能存到它的这个网站上去，是吧？然后在它的网站上再写出来。所以在这个 JavaScript 里面呢，有一个这个函数叫做 make request。所以你如果是先用 JavaScript 的 API 把这个数据取出来，然后你要把它存到你的 database 这个数据库里面去的话呢，你就用 make request。make request 呢，它那个变量呢有一个这个 URL， 那 URL 就是你的 URL， 随便你怎么写什么样的 URL 都可以。
会不会有这个跨站点的问题 ？JavaScript
对，是跨站点这个问题是有的，但这个问题已经在这个新的里面已经处理好了。
但是我如果开发 widget 的话，我不需要关心这个跨站点问题，就是
你不需要关心，对，它自动给你，我们专门有这个叫 proxy server 去控制。
就是说实际上我这个信息实际上传到你那儿，然后你们传。
没错，一点没错。
谢谢。
就是作为一个开发者来说，他可能比较关心在很多这种容器之间这种用户共享的问题。就如果一个用户他可能在10个网站有10个注册用户，但这个一个应用开发，它不能在10个网站它就会处理这10个用户，其实它是一个用户，所以这方面有没有？
对，问题是中文的问题是这个开发者对这个容器之间，所以你比如说你一个用户有很多账号，然后你希望呢就是从一个这个容器到另外一个容器能够串起来连起来，是吧？The question that this gentleman had is that when you are one user on one container and you want to be able to do cross-container communication, so I'll let you guys answer that.
Sure. With the REST APIs, it is possible to have server-to-server communication. So it's up to each social networking site by which they can, essentially decide on how they can communicate this type of data between the hosts. Do you have anything to add on that? Yeah. So REST is pretty much the way to go. Comprendido?
You can pin your REST too, Sean.
Yeah.
说的那个 REST 呢，那部分就是可以解决这个问题。 现在这个0.7的这个 spec 还没 REST 还没完全出来。那0.8将来出来以后呢，原则上是可以的，但是每家那个容器的这个政策有时候会不一样，所以还是会有些工作量，但是就是原则上可以做到。
我想问一下，就是说，其实这些社区网站最重要的就是用户群。假设我们公司的网站，比如有5000万用户的话，和这些网站一起用 Open Social， 它能不能共享一个 Open ID？ 就是说，在所有的这些网站里面都是用一个 Open ID， 然后呢，它不需要去各自进行验证。谢谢。
所以问题是提到的是，你用这个一个网站，你有很多这个 user， 然后但是你要是去别的网站，能不能用 Open ID？ 我们下一讲会讲到的，而且会有一个示范，是用这个我们 Google 叫 Friend Connect， 那个你在做那个东西的时候就用 Open ID， 可以不需要去到处 login 了，它自动就可以做到。下一讲可以提到的。还有后面有问题吗？最后面那位先生，就是你。如果后面还有问题的话，能不能就是站到这边来排个队，这样可以快一点。
你好，我想就是 Google 它做的最出色的地方是在于搜索这一方面。像搜索像用搜索引擎有很巨大的用户量，然后在网络上用这一个社区的也有很多的用户量。我就想知道，像这一个 Open Social 这一个平台，就是它有没有对这一个像搜索引擎的这一块的支持，或者说它能不能就是帮助这个搜索引擎来吸引这一个社区的用户量，或者帮助社区来吸引这一个搜索引擎的用户量，就是有没有这方面的技术或者是办法？
这个问题是说，如果这个搜索做得很好，在这 Open Social 里面能不能就借用搜索的这个 Google 的长处，直接跟这个 Open Social 连起来，是不是？
对，就他们的。
Okay. So then I can ask you to answer this question. He's asking about search. He's saying that Google search, Google is an expert in searching, and are there areas that people can integrate searching into the Open Social directly, so application developers can really leverage the searching ability of Google?
I was going to talk about AJI. So yeah, if you remember in the keynote this morning, you can integrate any number of JavaScript APIs into your application. So if you recall the demo where there was a bit of Open Social integrated also with some other AJAX APIs such as Maps and AJAX Search. In this same manner, you can use the AJAX Search API to essentially do Google searches, but entirely programmatically using JavaScript. So since Open Social applications are HTML and JavaScript, you can integrate them together and actually provide like a nice mashup. Did you need a translation, or is that okay? Go ahead. So now in Chinese.
你们看这个 Chris 这个中文学的多快，哎。
So I'll ask a question in English.
Yeah.
Well, say I have a web app. I'm creating a couple of widgets for Order Kenya. And what's the recommended implementation for me to manage my customers? Say just follow the blockchain experiment. Say someone has just offered high five code. So should I maintain them as the same user or treat them as different user? So what's the recommended approach for this? Thank you.
这位先生问的问题呢是，比如说他是个开发者，然后他在写了一个这个应用程序，然后在 Orchid 上可以用，在 HiFi 上可以用，但是 Orchid 上这个 data 取下来 ，Orchid 有 Orchid ID，HiFi 上有 HiFi 的 ID， 这个不同的 ID 不一样，你都存到数据库里面，是吧？他的问题呢是，对，你怎么把这个给连起来？这个不同语是不一样，就是说你在这个 HiFi 上 user 叫 A。在这个 Orchid 上，比如说这个 user 叫 B， 那个你 Open Social 没办法知道它 A 和 B 是同一个人。对，现在这个 container 这个容器它没有这部分功能。 So Dan, is that he's asking that across the container you have different IDs. Going forward in the 0.8 spec, are there going to be some way to identify one user in one container to another user, to the same user in the other container?
Right. So to speak to that question, currently there is no plans for it, but that said, Open Social is a very open spec, so if you have a proposal for it, we'd welcome you to put that into the community and get people to give feedback on it. Also, one other point about sort of where this is all stored. Part of Open Social is a sort of a lightweight data store for key value pairs. So that's where you could store your user information. And if you wanted to have that sync back to another server, you could use RESTful APIs coming out in 0.8. And actually, the good part there is you don't have to have a server if you don't want to. And that's sort of the point of the persistence layer.
还有吗？我再问后面来一个吧，那位女士那位女同志，女。
你好，我想问一个非技术性的问题，就是社区。
请讲响一点，我没听见，抱歉。
我想问一个就是非技术性的问题，我想问就是说这个社区Open Source 这种社区平台以后发展的一个。就是说它一个盈利点在什么地方？因为现在国内有好多那些就是说校内啊，还是海内啊，还有比如说豆瓣那一类的，他们的一些他们就说未来就是听豆瓣的一些就是未来的一个盈利点，就是说一个精准广告投放，因为它以后它有很多用户现在已经就超过100万了。它的那些用户在里边，它会有一些，比如说书籍或者电影的一些兴趣爱好，就是那些收集呢，就是通过这个用户的这些东西，我们收集一些用户的一些资料，然后以后我们的广告投放会比较精准那一些，然后这是未来的一个就是盈利点。然后比如现在还有比如说像那个像Facebook 啊什么的，他们有什么送礼物，会有一些花钱啊，就是1:1的那种比例来购买礼品啊，或者说投放广告，然后就是我放 advice 什么的，然后就也会有一个盈利。我想知道就是除了广告这方面之外，以后有没有什么新的那种盈利的一种增长点？
有没有什么新的什么？
就是盈利收入的一个新的方式，就是
新的方式，对。
就这个。
问题是关于这个怎么通过这个社交这个 Open Social 呢，能够做完应用程序以后呢，然后在上面怎么可以产生这个才艺是吧？怎么赚钱法？所以我让我们的这个产品总监来帮你解释一下。She's asking about
So for monetization, a lot of applications are doing revenue sharing with various containers. Currently today, Open Social has a set of technical specifications. I think that it's possible in the future there will be more policy consistency across containers. But as of now, each container works directly with developers to figure out what the appropriate revenue sharing model is for things like ads, or you could also do things where you actually buy gifts with real money to give them to your friends. So those are just some examples, but certainly I'm sure that there are other good ideas that the community would love to hear about if you have any.
So shall we wrap up now? I think we're going to have to provide a transitionary time as well.
Yeah, one or two more questions. 再可以回答1-2个问题。可以。
我想这个 Open Social，向我描述了一个非常大的一个关于社交的一个网络。就我想知道一下，在未来有没有一些别的扩展？因为目前就我知道的一些所有的关于这个 OS 的一些信息都指向了社交的一个方面的问题，就仅仅只限于像我们提供一些更好的、更丰富的玩儿更丰富的在那个互联网上交朋友更方便一些。有没有想过别的一些东西？就比如说我们都知道现在就非常兴起的非常快的一些东西，比如那个电子商务还有网上购物。我想问一下，就现在这个我们 Open Social 有没有想过，就是像当初好像是05年有一个比较另类的产品叫做 Itch.io， 那个就关于博客，把那个所有的博客都做成那个购物的东西。因为我们知道我们在那个网上购物比较常去的就是像淘宝或者易贝之类的。 就我们想要卖东西，就只能在上面就注册一个账号，然后不停的卖东西做生意，然后这样才有自己的一个信用。但是有时候就更多的时候，我们仅只想卖一个不用的那个数码相机，或者换一台电视。就我们并不是一个商人，我们没有办法聚集这么多的一个信用。我就想一下，这个 OS 是不是有这方面的考虑呢？
他问题大家听清楚了，所以 Open Social 它所以简单的还就是这个讲应用这个社交的方面的，他还想还有更多的可以做的，所以更多的可以做就是在座的各位这个开发者自己可以希望大家都能够利用自己的创造性，能够找出新的来。比如说你做这个买的东西的话，你可以就做一个这个应用程序去卖这个淘宝上的东西，你直接就可以把淘宝也有它的 API。或者是像eBay有 API 的，淘宝我不知道，你可以把它的东西调进来，放到你的应用程序里面，你就继续做。所以 Open Social 主要是个平台，提供这个开发人去做这些事情。
关键就是这个信用问题。
信用。那部分的现在就像刚才Dan讲的，这个是希望大家，如果你有好的提议，可以提出来。这个因为是开源的东西，提出来以后，你直接可以加到下一个这个 spec 里面去。最后一个问题，还有最后一个问题，好几个。OK， 所以在最后一个问题，然后因为我们下一讲也是讲这个 Open Social 的，所以下一讲还可以继续问问题。
好，谢谢。我的问题是，就是说，就像5.1Job还有校内网这些都是这 Open Social 的一些受益者。我想问一下，他们其实都是它的受益者，而且他们都是竞争伙伴的关系。因为刚才您提到的，就是说 Open Social 它提供了一个基础支持，就是说，两大的容器的一些客户可以有一个 merge。然后我想问一下，就是他们以后的一些商业模式是什么？因为他们之间毕竟存在一些竞争关系。如果说客户流入某一家的 container 的话，会不会对你们这个 Open Social 产生一定的影响？谢谢。
这个，所以他问的问题是商业模式，这个像校内啊、海内啊，他们也是竞争对手，是吧 ？Open Social 并不能解决他们这些问题，他们还要自己去摸索和解决。Open Social 只能提供他一个平台，让这个他们可以去用，然后特别是对这个开发者有好处，开发者写出一个程序，在各家都可以用。然后具体某一家这个社交网啊，什么各家游戏，它具体怎么去把它赚钱的话，那是他们的问题。Open Social 不能回答这个问题。所以，那我们就这样。所以下一讲讲这个社交容器，然后我们还会去做一些这个演示，具体怎么去装起来。OK， 谢谢。
That's okay. Thank you very much for our session. We actually have another session immediately following on open social containers. Thank you for Dan for coming by and giving us essentially the great news about the Chinese partners that are helping out now. And thanks as well, Jason, on the computer. So, 谢谢 and thank you.